Well, hello everyone. Thank you again for joining me at Heart and Soul. We stream out on YouTube and it's under Unprecedented Top TV. So I'm also the CEO of Freedom from Abuse, which is a charity seeking to prevent child abuse and in fact any abuse, because there's so much of it in society. But I've been doing that for about 23 years. But for Heart and Soul, I'm inviting anyone who has a lived experience or a story to tell, or even a profession or a job that maybe people don't really want to know about. And I invite them on my show because I think that's the way we learn and we can maybe change our thoughts about people's reality. I think there's a lot of people in society who think they may be wrapped in bubble wrap and they don't want to look at other people's reality. And I just think by having special guests on my show, it broadens people's minds and it might make them think, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, right. And that's why I do it. So basically, if you want to come on the show and you haven't heard from me yet, because I do tend to sort of target people, then please give us a ring at Unprecedented TV or contact Marilyn Hawes. You'll find me anywhere, actually, if you put my name in. But today, we are going to kick the elephant out of the room and we are going to talk about Parkinson's disease, right? And we have the lovely Claire Dale on right now, and she's going to join us any minute now. I think she's going to pop up. There she is. Hello, and thank you very much, Claire, for joining us in your very busy, important role. Now, Claire is the Assistant Director of Research and External Communications and Involvement. That's a lot to put on your business card, Claire.
Luckily, we don't have business cards anymore.
Oh, do you know?
They're so old hat, I think.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, all right, fine. Now, the weird thing is, I kind of sort of targeted Claire. We were at an event together and we were standing waiting a long time for a coffee and we just started talking. And I didn't realize I'd actually bumped into the top honcho. And I thought, ooh, she'd be good on my show. And here we are. So because I'm nosy, Claire, how does someone as young and vibrant as you find themselves researching Parkinson's disease? Did you wake up one day at 10 years old and think, I want to be a Parkinson's researcher?
Well, not exactly, no. I don't think I knew what I wanted to do when I was 10. And I think that kind of stayed, I still wasn't sure by the time I was 20, really. But by that point, I was studying neuroscience and molecular biology. And I thought, because I've always been fascinated with how our bodies work and what happens when things go wrong, and especially in the brain. So I really enjoyed my degree, but I fairly quickly realized that I was not really cut out to be a scientist because I'm horrendous at experiments. I would go and do the experiments as part of my course, and you have to be so precise, Marilyn. You have to measure everything accurately and do the same thing over and over again, very, very meticulous. And I'm not those things. I love the science. I love learning about it. I love the progress that's happening to develop, our understanding of the brain and how it works. But I realized life in the lab was not for me. So I have ended up in a slightly different place. So at Parkinson's UK, we fund medical research to try and find better treatments for Parkinson's. We don't do the research ourselves. So that's kind of perfect for me. And because we're funded entirely through voluntary donations, mainly from people who have Parkinson's themselves or their loved ones do, a huge part of the work that my team does is about trying to inform people about what research we're doing, what research is happening more broadly, get people excited about the hope that there is in the research that's being done, and get them involved in the research as much as we can.
That's brilliant. I mean, do you find out of interest, because I deal a lot with dementia people, and I honestly, I think I bring the average age of my village down by 20 years, actually. We've got a lot of elderly people here and they're tottering around, and a lot have dementia. And I didn't realize that there's about 100 types of dementia. So if you get dementia, are you likely to get Parkinson's? And if you get Parkinson's, are you likely to get dementia?
Yes, is the short answer. I mean, for people with Parkinson's, they have about a 50% chance of developing dementia within 10 years of being diagnosed with the condition. I think I'm not sure what the statistics are the other way around, but things are going wrong inside the brain, and often these things knock onto each other. And Parkinson's, people think, is about movement primarily, and you know, the symptoms that are visible to us tend to be movement ones, things like people shaking, being slow, being stiff, shuffling steps, that kind of thing. But actually so many other things can go wrong as part of Parkinson's, and there's over 40 symptoms which can cover everything from anxiety, sleeplessness, and things like cognitive problems as well.
See, that's interesting, because this is why I wanted you on, because I think there's a lot of mythology out there that people have decided that, oh, if you have the tremors, then, oh yes, that's Parkinson's. And if you don't have the tremors, oh no, that's not. No, you haven't got Parkinson's. And they make these sort of opinions based on absolutely Scooby-Doo. And I think, you know, that's what I wanted you to say. So it's all about the neural pathways in the brain then, is it? I mean, can that affect your actual senses, like your sense of hearing, your sense of smell? Does it impact that?
Yeah, so actually one of the first signs of someone developing Parkinson's can be losing their sense of smell. So some of the symptoms, particularly the non-movement symptoms, can occur many years before someone's diagnosed, and they can be things like losing sense of smell, constipation, sleep problems, mood problems. And what causes Parkinson's is actually the loss of certain cells inside the brain that make a chemical called dopamine. And that chemical is involved in many things inside the brain. It's involved in movement, so coordinating movement, which is why Parkinson's causes movement difficulties. But it can be involved in so many other things as well, which is why it has such broad-ranging effects for people with it.
I think and I hope we have the assets there, but I think you sent me a diagram of the brain and where the dopamine emanates from.
Yes.
Can't put the asset in now, then perhaps you can actually explain what it is. How does this happen? Where is this dopamine stored?
So the part of the brain that's affected in Parkinson's is actually very small, and it's right in the very heart of the brain, in a part called the basal ganglia. Oh, there we go. The beautiful pictures there. So you can see the blue dot in the middle is the part of the brain primarily affected in Parkinson's. And it's very tiny, but it's extremely important because the brain cells that live there make this chemical called dopamine, and that allows them to communicate with other parts of the brain to help to coordinate movement. So when the brain cells struggle to make dopamine, start to be lost, that's when you start to see some of the symptoms of Parkinson's. And actually, it's only when probably about 70% of the brain cells in this region are affected that we think it's possible to diagnose Parkinson's, because our brains are amazing at compensating for the loss. We're able to carry on for quite a long time, even with these diminishing levels of dopamine.
See, it's also, I mean, as people get older, I think, and that's maybe why diagnosis comes later, because a lot of things are like, you know, I mean, my neighbour stopped being able to park the car and things like that. And his wife was like, oh, well, that's because he's getting older. And it's very easy, isn't it, to say, oh, my husband is 80 odd or whatever, or my wife is whatever, and you don't go to the doctor because you make excuses that this is the aging process. And I don't know, am I right in this? Or
oh yeah, absolutely. I think that we think there are about 166,000 people in the UK who are living with Parkinson's right now with a diagnosis, but I'm sure it's hard to get the data on this, but I'm sure there's many, many more living with Parkinson's who are not diagnosed because of just what you said. People think getting slower, getting stiffer, maybe shaking is just part of getting older and nothing to worry about, or that there's no help. And actually there is, and it's really important people do go to the doctor. And then there's also lots of people who are waiting for a diagnosis because
please,
such long delay.
There's someone's grandma in the village here, and she's actually the granddaughter is pulling her hair out because she just cannot. She's waited months for a diagnosis, and then, you know, a lot of the people I talk to are like, they are so frustrated that the GPs just don't seem to. They'll talk about dementia, but they don't seem to know diddly squat about Parkinson's. It seems to be something that, and I've noticed it particularly. So I live in Bedfordshire, and it apparently is particularly bad in Bedfordshire, where GPs don't seem to want to think that Parkinson's actually links with dementia and the other way around. They're like, oh no, you've got dementia. No, you haven't got Parkinson's. And there's a lot of frustration around the people I see who think, well, yes, I haven't got a diagnosis here, you know, and the GPs aren't particularly helping, really.
No, and most GPs will struggle to diagnose Parkinson's, and it really relies, because we don't have a test for Parkinson's, there isn't a blood test that you can be referred for, you know, that can tell you yay or nay, do you have Parkinson's or not. So the only way to be diagnosed is to be referred to a specialist. That's usually a neurologist or a geriatrician, and they will do an assessment of your symptoms, a clinical assessment, just based on, you know, how you move and how you respond to sort of being tugged in certain ways and how quickly you can tap your fingers together. And based on their very, you know, expert assessment, they will diagnose you with Parkinson's or not, or something else. But there's such a bottleneck getting to those neurologists, because there's, you know, thousands and thousands of people developing Parkinson's every year, and the NHS is struggling to keep up with those numbers. So it is a really difficult situation.
So are you, from what you've just said, am I understanding this right, that it's actually on the increase?
Well, it's a really complicated picture with Parkinson's. We've recently done the largest ever study of Parkinson's in the UK. And what our study shows is that there is an increasing number of people in the UK living with Parkinson's, but that's largely because we've got a growing population and an aging population. So, you know, as we all get older, we're all more likely to get Parkinson's. In other parts of the world, it does seem to be increasing more. And that, again, might be driven by the fact that the global population is growing, especially in some certain parts. So places like China, for example, there's more awareness of Parkinson's in some countries, which is leading to more diagnosis. And there's also people who believe that you know, there's environmental triggers might be driving the increase in some places.
Yes, I've read that. I have read that as well, that, you know, that is it like bad sort of like polluted air and stuff like that can cause it? Is that right? You know, there's am I right? I was thinking I read something about that, but I mean, are there certain, like, say for example, African people, they are more likely to get sickle cell disease, aren't they? Are there certain you know, certain countries, put it that way, people from certain countries, are they more higher on the risk scale or not?
It's not really clear that there are countries where it's, you know, or populations where it's more common to have Parkinson's. Actually, in our analysis in the UK, we found that in terms of ethnicity, most other ethnicities, so Black, Asian, Arab, so on, would be at lower risk of being diagnosed with Parkinson's than white British, apart from, interestingly, Asian Pakistani, who seem to be at higher risk. And we cannot explain any of those differences, really. And part of the reason we can't explain them is because most of the research that's been carried out so far into Parkinson's has really focused on Caucasian, white, European populations. Yeah. We know very little about Parkinson's in Asian and Black, African and Caribbean populations, and that's a real gap in our knowledge. There's starting to be more research in those populations, and we think there might be some genetic differences that might be driving some of this, but it may also be things to do with, you know, we have different diets, different lifestyles, different environments, you know, maybe some of those things are playing a part as well, because we don't understand what causes Parkinson's. We think it is a very complicated mixture of things that's unique to each individual. So genetics might be part of it, but also things in our lifestyle and environment. So
that's excuse me, that's another thing. Is it genetic? If you had it, is your child likely to get it, or your grandchild likely to get it? Is it inherited?
In rare cases, it can be an inherited condition caused by a single gene, but that's extremely rare. In most cases of Parkinson's, we cannot tell someone why they developed the condition. People can seek genetic testing if they are diagnosed at an early age, so under 50, and or have a strong family history of the condition. It's more likely that there might be some genetics at play. But many of the genes that we know about that we can inherit from our parents, don't necessarily directly cause Parkinson's by themselves, but they might increase our susceptibility. So, for instance, in my family, I know, I've got a family history of heart problems and angina and so on. And lo and behold, when I go to my GP, I'm more likely to have high cholesterol. I have to keep an eye on it. And that's just something in my DNA that I've inherited. It doesn't mean I will end up getting heart problems because I can manage my diet, my exercise, that kind of thing to control it. And it's a bit similar with Parkinson's. There are genes that can kind of, I hate this phrase, but load the gun. But things like the environment and our lifestyle are potentially the things that ultimately pull the trigger. So
I know, like with the people I know some friends that work for TIPS Dementia, and they have a group called Early Onset. I mean, can someone of 20, 25 get Parkinson's?
Yes, it's very rare, but young people do get diagnosed with Parkinson's, and often it's more of a struggle for them to get a diagnosis because it's often thought to be something else. It's people don't see a 20-year-old and think, oh, these symptoms must be Parkinson's. But I've certainly met people who've been diagnosed at very young ages. We know that there are, people who are raising families, still working, while also living with Parkinson's. And I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but there's a significant number of people who are younger living with Parkinson's. And of course, if you're diagnosed when you're 20, you're going to be living a long time with this condition.
That's also interesting. That was my next question. I mean, because it's treated as terminal, isn't it? Because it can't be cured. So if you want to apply for, like, what would it be, an attendance allowance or something like that, you're going to get it, and you're going to get the full whack because it's considered terminal. So what is or can't you say, is it a bit like how long's a piece of string? What is the general longevity? Are you likely to die with it or from it? Is it a killer in itself?
Really great question. I don't think it is. I'm not sure exactly what the definition of a terminal illness is, but I don't think Parkinson's is considered a terminal illness. I think terminal illness is something which is likely to cause death within a fairly short period of time. Whereas Parkinson's, it's like you say, we don't have a cure for it. We can't take it away. We can't stop it in its tracks. It's a condition that will continue over time, and people will have more and more problems as it goes on. But it's really difficult to say. There's not a clear window of like how long someone will live with Parkinson's. It's a very variable condition. So some people's progression, how it develops over time, will be fairly slow, and actually they might live 15, 20, 25 years and do very well. For other people, it might progress more quickly and to more complicated problems. The thing that seems to be the most important factor is actually age. So if you're diagnosed at a young age with Parkinson's, you are likely to live a long time with the condition. Your condition tends to be, you're less likely to get things like dementia. But if you're diagnosed at a much older age, say after the age of 80, often, that is more likely to come along with dementia. And, you're already 80, so your life expectancy is always going to be a bit shorter. But yeah, it's very, very difficult to predict at the moment.
Because a lot of the people, two or three, four people in the village that have got dementia, and there's this one granny, but they're nearly all men. Is Parkinson, is there a gender thing? Is it more likely with men, or is that not? Is that not? Is it just an equal mix?
That's an excellent question as well. So I think most people think of it as more of a man's condition than a woman's condition. In our recent analysis, about 60% of people in the UK with Parkinson's are men, and 40% are women. So it is more likely in men than women, but it's not a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. And actually, women are more likely to live longer. So they kind of outlast some of the men who get Parkinson's.
We're tougher.
But we do see what's really interesting, and this is some work that we're doing at the moment, and we're just running in the run-up to International Women's Day as we're talking.
Yes, true.
That Parkinson's may manifest differently in women than men. women might have slightly different collections of symptoms, more likely to have, things like anxiety, for example, as part of the condition, less likely actually to get the dementia that we've been talking about. But also there are things like if a woman is diagnosed at an early age, some women are having babies while having Parkinson's.
I was just going to say, does it impact fertility?
Yeah, it's very rare. So the research that's available about pregnancy and Parkinson's is pretty thin, but we know that women can safely, carry and have babies, and many, the medications do seem to be safe, many of them, but obviously it needs to be very carefully managed. Also, periods, around the time of periods, we've heard from women that symptoms can change vastly, and also when it comes to perimenopause and menopause, that can have a really big impact on women and potentially exacerbate some of the Parkinson's symptoms, or even be mistaken. So the symptoms of menopause and the symptoms of Parkinson's can be quite overlapping.
Wow.
So I've heard from women who have, started to experience symptoms of Parkinson's during the menopause, and they have been missed because the doctor just says, oh no, that's just the menopause.
Oh yes, of course. How many of us have heard that? You're far too young and lovely, but some of us have had that.
Yeah, so it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge, and so we think there's lots of complexity there, and it's really important that both women and men participate in research,
Yes.
To help us understand how the condition might differ between the two sexes, but also that we're able to separate them out and sort of look at them independently and say, okay, what's the experience of Parkinson's for women and how is it different to that of men, so that we can provide the right kind of tailored support.
Because it must be, the research must be, it must take ages. You think, well, that's what we're going to do then. We're going to look at what women are like when they're having periods and stuff like that. But to get that cohort and enough people, that must take a heck of a long time to actually come to the end of that piece of research. Or do you have different sort of departments doing all sorts of different types of research?
Well, great question again. So we fund research both at universities and hospitals, around the UK. So we probably have around 50 projects running at the moment, worth about £40 million if you add them all together. So it's a huge amount. We work closely in collaboration with other organisations as well. So probably you've heard of the Michael J. Fox Foundation.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So they're the largest Parkinson's organisation in the world, and they fund a huge amount of research, and we collaborate quite a lot on those projects. And like you say, a lot of the work that we've done has been, gathering cohorts of people living from the point of diagnosis and sort of trying to gather as much information as we can about those people over time.
So you're Parkinson's UK. So is there Parkinson's Europe, or is it Parkinson's China?
It varies around the world. So there is an organisation called Parkinson's Europe, and it's an umbrella. But it's actually a tiny organisation, very, very small. We're much, much bigger, and that is a sort of like a group that kind of work with charities across Europe to try and bring things together and campaign at a European level, that kind of thing. And across Europe, we're by far the biggest Parkinson's organisation. There are significant ones, though, in many countries. But yeah, it really varies from country to country in terms of what kind of patient organisations they have, if any.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah. So what is then? Because I remember, I think the first time I actually really thought about it was Jeremy Paxman. And he was diagnosed, he'd been walking his dog and he just fell face planted on the pavement, didn't he? And he smashed his face and he went in and they did tests. And and then he did that brilliant documentary called Parkinson's and Me. Is that Me or My Parkinson's or something?
Yeah, something like
because
that.
I used to watch him a lot on University Challenge, and I myself have been. I used to do a lot. When people had money in media, they take you around in their lovely posh cars and taxis. And I always used to say to the taxi drivers, "Oh, who's the nicest man you've had in your taxi? Who's a celebrity?" And a lot of them would say Jeremy Paxman. He's really nice, blah blah blah. So when this happened, I thought, well, I'm going to watch this, and I thought, crikey, all he did was fall over. That's devastating diagnosis, and I think it must be devastating because people I mean, obviously the knowledge is that that you're out there, Parkinson's UK, but it must be a real smack in the face when you're your mind must run wild with you. Parkinson's, oh my golly, am I ever going to stop shaking? Am I ever going to be able to do anything? And I think that must be like being hit like with a brick, really, when you first get that diagnosis. And again, that's why I wanted you on here, because, I've seen it happen. I've seen people react like that. I mean, what are the main treatments? I mean, does that also vary according to how it's manifesting itself?
Yeah, I just want to comment on what you said about diagnosis. I think it's so true. Often comes as a shock. Some people, have been waiting for a long time for a diagnosis, and they might have actually worked out what they think it is, and it comes as a relief almost. Finally have a name for what's happened. But we know people's experiences of diagnosis can be very varied, but many people have a very difficult experience and be left with very little information. So the doctor might say, "Oh, I'm sorry to say you've got Parkinson's. I'll see you in 6 months." We hear that all the time. That's the sort of level of information and support they get. So that's why we want as many people as possible to know that we exist, and they can come to us for that information and support when it isn't available.
This story, I think, is absolutely horrible. I think it's dreadful, this story. But it was somebody I met who was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia with Parkinson's, and this story went like this. This guy was walking down the corridor, and this was private neurologist, and was told, he sat down and he was apparently told, which is an awful way to tell someone, oh, well, I know what you've got. You've got Lewy body dementia with Parkinson's. And I think his daughter was with him, and he was like, pardon, what? Well, that's what you've got. And the daughter said, I think she said, that's right. Oh, you haven't done any tests or anything? Well, it's a trained eye. Your dad does this, your dad does that. I've watched him walking down the corridor, and still there was this disbelief. And but what's this Lewy body thing, says the daughter, right? Anyway, he wasn't very helpful, apparently. And this is awful. I think this is about 18 months ago. And as he got up to walk out, the dad, the daughter's there, and this neurologist said, pray he just dies of a heart attack. What? When she came back, I said, he said what? Goodness me. I mean, I thought people that worked in the medical profession were supposed to have empathy at the top of the list. But, and then that's right. What else? Oh, that's right. He said, that's right. After he got this diagnosis, he was obviously shocked. And he actually said, apparently, how long have I got? And he said, well, I don't know. How much toothpaste is there in a tube? And then he was told that because he had Lewy body, it would be quite quick. I think that is just absolutely outrageous. I don't know. I mean, people really do need to think, don't they? I think, open your brain before you open your mouth, because it's a devastating way to be told. I mean, it's awful. Because, I mean, what? I mean, he's still around. But, I mean, she tells this story quite a lot because she was actually horrified. But, so what are the treatments then? What is it? If you've got this, what would be the main treatment? If you've got the dopamine, it's down to dopamine loss, then presumably you give them dopamine, do you, or what?
Essentially, yes. Yeah. So there's a range of tablets. It's mainly initially medication that people will take, that it's just pills, and taking them helps boost the levels of dopamine inside the brain or mimic the way that it works. And that can be very effective for controlling particularly the movement problems, and especially in the sort of fairly early stages of the condition. And they can work for quite a long time for a lot of people and be very effective. They're not so good for dealing with the non-motor symptoms that we've talked about. They can help with things like mood and sleep and fatigue and pain and things, but they're less effective for those things. And the thing that we always say, medication is really important and can be really helpful, but there are things like exercise, having access to physiotherapy, speech and language therapy, all of these other things, lifestyle modifications, having a really healthy diet that's balanced, because lots of people with Parkinson's have issues with digestion and gut problems.
Oh.
It has to be really holistic. The best care and support and treatment is holistic, and not just about taking a pill a day or a few pills every day, but about changing some of those other things as well, and having the right support around you.
So what sort of, you say exercise, what sort of exercise is good then? Because I would imagine if you've got the mobility thing, that is potentially going to be a problem, I would imagine. But also, are there certain exercise things that are more beneficial to Parkinson's to keep people more mobile?
It's really individual, like many things with Parkinson's. And that's why having a referral to a physiotherapist is really helpful at the early stages, to sort of give you a bit of an assessment and be like, right, okay, so what are your main problems? Because if your main problem with Parkinson's is stiffness, then perhaps things like yoga or Pilates, things that improve your flexibility might be a big part of your exercise regime. Whereas if your main problem is slowness, for example, you might be looking at different exercises. But basically, the research suggests that any kind of exercise is good. The more you can do, the better. The more varied it can be, the better. We know people, there's lots of walking football teams for Parkinson's.
Oh, yeah.
There's the sociable element to it is really great. And, people might be worried about going to a Parkinson's local group, but somehow going along to a walking football session feels less daunting. It feels more familiar and you're less like, oh, I don't know if I want to talk to people. Walking football, yoga, boxing, dancing is huge. So any kind of exercise is good. And I think if it can be social, all the better, because you're more likely to do it. Anything that's fun. There are lots of online exercise classes as well. So if you're not, worried about going out, or, not able to use public transport for whatever reason, you can do a Zoom class of Pilates or yoga or boxercise or whatever it is. And all of those things are available to find and search for on the Parkinson's UK website, specialised classes for people with Parkinson's.
And how, as I say, because I've got friends who that themselves have got dementia and all that, and they go to different charities, and some of them have got the Parkinson's as well. It seems to be a terribly isolated situation for the carers. And do Parkinson's UK have something like that? Because at our local, I think we are the only place in Bedford, actually Bedfordshire. We have this apparently it's a very local dementia thing called Tibbs dementia, and they do an awful lot for the carers. But when you talk to the carers, there's this isolation aspect that you're dealing with it for the first, what has happened to my life, and that huge change. Do you have people that the carers can talk to? Do you have like a support line and things that the carers can do and groups they can do, or is that, are you too big for that?
Oh, definitely not too big for that. I think you're so right. Like often the carers get forgotten about in so many of these things. A few things to highlight that carers can access. So we have a free and confidential helpline at Parkinson's UK that people can ring to, for whatever reason, if they've got questions, information that they need, if they want to ask about benefits, for example, so practical things, but also if they're having, a terrible day and they need to talk to someone, it's there for anyone who needs it. And we know that care is a lifeline for many carers who sometimes don't know where to turn. They're really struggling. So that's one thing. We also have, I think it's now over 450 local groups across the UK.
Wow.
They are run by volunteers, and more often than not, they're run mainly by people with Parkinson's and carers, often carers, and sometimes even bereaved carers will carry on running these local groups, which is quite amazing to me. And they're a place for people who are either with Parkinson's or living with someone, supporting someone with Parkinson's, to get together and support each other essentially. And I know that carers get a huge amount. And often they will have sessions where, you know, the carers will go off and have that time together without their person with Parkinson's, which is so important, you know, being able to share their worries and burdens without, you know, in a sort of safe, confidential way. So yeah, it's really important that we do everything we can to support them, because without carers, you know, where would we be? Where are, you know, they do so much unpaid work, you know, we just need to do more for carers.
So I felt myself welling up the other day, because there was a lady I know. What's she now? She must be she's 60. That's right. And her husband's had I don't know which dementia it is, but he's had it for about 5 years. He used to be very, very good at sport, apparently. And she was saying the other day, I'm feeling very upset because people don't call me anymore and people don't come round anymore. And it was her birthday, and she said somebody had not even rung. They'd like left a bunch of flowers on the doorstep and they hadn't rung the bell. And she was apparently in the bathroom sorting out her husband. And she said, am I just being weird, or is anybody else like having to sort of experience this? And then other people said the same, that, and as the dementia or the Parkinson's got worse, these ladies were saying that they've noticed that some of the family tend to stay away a bit more, which is really hard, isn't it? If that it really, and I was sort of saying to this girl, I said, oh, I'm sure you're imagining it, you know, I'm sure you are. But she said, no, I don't think I am. Okay. But I mean, that isolation, it must be awful, as I say, especially if you've been very busy and you've had a really a good job, and there's suddenly, like, for some people it's overnight, isn't it? I am now a carer. And then that relationship that you had, that was that cherished relationship, becomes something very different. And I was, especially because does it impact your mind, like forgetfulness, like dementia does?
It can do. So dementia that people with Parkinson's experience, the sort of symptoms, can be quite different to, say, Alzheimer's dementia. Right. So people often lots of people have problems with their speech, not just with actually articulating things, you know, because their movement is affected and their ability to speak, but finding words, forgetting their train of thought. That kind of thing can happen quite a lot. Problems with planning and organizing, you know, there's simple things like, how do I get myself ready to go out, can become more challenging for someone with Parkinson's and cognitive issues. So it's things like that. It can be quite subtle, but, you know, it's less, you know, lots of people think of like Alzheimer's dementia of like forgetting who people are, and that's less of a thing for people with Parkinson's, which is quite fortunate.
If you've got it co-joined, then that's difficult, because a lovely lady I know, her husband passed away at Christmas, and it's really quite touching, actually. Apparently he said to the nurses, he died about 3 days before Christmas, and he said to the nurses, I don't know who she is, but I know she loves me. Oh. And that was said at the funeral. And I thought that's really touching, that he did, somewhere in the cerebrum, he must have, you know, known. Oh, well, that was another thing he'd said as well. She used to put him to bed when he got to the stage of not remembering. You have to sort of have a sort of graveyard sense of humour, really, don't you? He said, oh, you better go soon because my wife will be coming home soon. So, God. And I think you have to have a laugh about it, because I think you'd probably go insane if you didn't. I mean, so going back to your research thing, what are the latest developments you're actually focusing on? You say you've got 50 different projects. What's ones we've just started, and what's the ones where you think you're now coming to an end with some sort of, you know, answer to something?
How long have we got? No. So it's really hard to pick favourites, but we are funding a number of clinical trials, which is when it gets really exciting for people with Parkinson's, because we're actually testing whether treatments and new therapies might be helpful and better than what we have already. We don't have any treatments that can slow, stop, or reverse Parkinson's from getting worse. So we're funding a number of trials testing drugs to see whether they might be able to do that. And some of those are even in phase 3. So that's the last stage of clinical trials before, if they're successful, they could be made available to people with the condition. So we've got a number of those studies going on. And interestingly, some of those are studying treatments that are actually already available for other things. So the drugs being tested in phase 3 for Parkinson's to see if they could slow down the course of Parkinson's. One of them is a cough medicine called Ambroxol. One is a prostate drug called terazosin. One's a blood pressure drug called telmisartan. So these are drugs that other people are taking for other conditions already, but might actually have this, completely unintended, but marvelous ability to slow down the course of Parkinson's. And because they're already available, if we can prove in clinical trials that they work, they can be made available very quickly and cheaply, which is pretty important. Exactly. Another trial I did want to mention, because we really need to hear from people who might be eligible to take part in, is another repurposing trial. So it's a drug that's already in use. It's called ondansetron. And the drug is currently in use for nausea, so treating sickness and vomiting. But again, strangely, we think it could be helpful for people with Parkinson's who experience hallucinations.
Oh, gosh.
And this is something that is very common in people who have Parkinson's and some form of dementia, actually. Hallucinations, so seeing things that aren't there. On a weekly basis, fairly regularly. We're looking for people across the whole UK who experience hallucinations as part of their Parkinson's or Lewy body dementia, and to take part in this trial of ondansetron. And if we can prove that ondansetron is effective for controlling hallucinations, again, it could be made available very quickly. We're hoping to be able to fill the trial. We're looking for 306 people in total, so that's a lot. We're hoping to be able to fill the trial by the end of this year and hopefully have some findings by next year.
This would be people who are, could it be people that have just been diagnosed, or is it people that are well into the Parkinson disease?
Most people who will be experiencing hallucinations as part of their Parkinson's will have had it for a number of years.
Right.
It's not usually an early symptom of the condition. It's something that tends to happen later on. And that's one of the challenges that we've been having with finding people for the study, because they're less connected, maybe less likely to be on email and to be, easy to find on social media, for example. So we really, anything that we can do to get the word out about the study, we're keen to do. So
are these hallucinations anything from, I don't know, I've just seen this lovely woman just walk across the room naked, or are they nasty, nasty monsters and ghouls and horrible things?
Again, really, really vary.
Okay.
Often they are animals or people in your home. Sometimes people say they don't really mind them. They know they're not real. Other times it can be really, really scary, really vivid, scary. And sometimes people, for some people, they can tell it's a hallucination. They know it's not real. For other people, it can feel very real and sometimes very threatening.
So yes, because the gentleman, his name was Ian, lovely guy, who passed away just before Christmas, about 2 weeks before that, he literally came out into the hallway and he had these kitchen scissors and he was aiming at his wife, and he wouldn't go in the living room. But he also, with what he had, the Parkinson's he had, he couldn't speak. He just hardly ever said a word, right? And not always. It was just like the last 6 months of it. And he started he wouldn't go into any of the rooms. And then she found him. Where's he gone now? He'd locked himself in the bathroom and she couldn't get in. And then she sat and waited for him, and out he came. And then he went into the ensuite bathroom and locked himself in there. So she waited. Then he went downstairs and he locked himself in the downstairs bathroom. And eventually, is it called the DIS team or something? It's called, I think, in Bedfordshire. It's a dementia something. It's like an emergency team of people that will come out, and they took him into hospital for assessment. And bless his heart, he died about 10 days or so after. But I thought at the time that, oh my goodness, that must be, because what did he see? What was he imagining that he could see, that he had to have these scissors and he wouldn't go in the living room and he wouldn't get in the car? I mean, it must be absolute hell and you can't articulate what you've seen. No. I mean, I couldn't believe it when she was telling me. I thought that is almost, I think, sort of worse for the carer to try and work that one out than actually being the carer, because you want to help, don't you? And and she couldn't help him, and she didn't know what to do, what it was that was causing him so much trauma. And of course then she had to say, well, if that, and of course fortunately, I mean, say fortunately, because he had terrible, his dementia was awful, his Parkinson's was awful, so in a way it was a blessing. But she had to actually say, because this came out of nowhere, she had to actually say to the hospital, he cannot come home. And this is right, I cannot have him home, rightly so, safeguarding, isn't it? Because he had these scissors. I mean, next time she said it could be a carving knife. I mean, and it was awfully hard for her. I couldn't believe I found myself saying that. He can't come home, and they just had their they just had their ruby wedding. That's right. I mean, I thought, oh my gosh, the things that you don't imagine. That can come through. I mean, and so do you sort of like keep notes and sort of like testimonies of that sort of thing for people, so you can say, we have seen this, we have heard of this, and this sort of thing?
Yeah, to some extent. So one of the most important things that it really helps us raise awareness of Parkinson's is these kinds of stories. I mean, even the terrible ones, because I think sometimes people's perception of Parkinson's is it's just a shake and it's not too bad.
That's why I wanted you on, because you always hear the shakes, the tremor.
Yeah, and so only 70% of people have a tremor who have Parkinson's. Not everyone does, and always we hear from people, it's not so much the movement symptoms that are the problem, it's all the other things which are unseen, unrecognized. So people sharing their experience, we're fortunate that so many people will share their experiences with us, and also through the media, to raise awareness of what Parkinson's really is and how devastating it can be. But also on the other side, people continue to do incredible things and advocate and live incredibly inspiring lives as well. So we kind of try and show both, like the positives and the difficult times.
And that, Claire, has wound this up with timing, with a perfect message of hope at the end. That I think what you're basically saying is, whatever it is, for as long as you can, I think this is what you're saying, that you can live the best life you can have. It is not so devastating, enjoy your mobility, enjoy eating well and all of that stuff until it comes to a point you can't. It's not, and I think that's the trouble when people get the diagnosis, they think that's it, it's over.
Yeah. And you're not alone as well. If you're living with something like Parkinson's, there are many others. And there's an amazing community of people who are there to support you. There's Parkinson's UK. There's lots of help, and I just wish that everybody knew that, because I think people often feel very alone.
That's why I wanted you on, because I think from what I've seen in neighbours and just generally around, and keep my ear to the ground, I think people are quite switched on about dementia and Alzheimer's, but the Parkinson's, and as I say, especially the GPs, people just, it's on the back shelf a bit. And that's why I so wanted you to come on. And that message of hope at the end is lovely, that you can still laugh and have fun and etc. So you're doing great work. This is going to go across YouTube, and I hope we are looking for 306 people to take part in your and can you see on the website, are there all sorts of advertisements for people to take part in different trials? Is it on the website?
Yeah, it's on our website. If you just search for Take Part in Research, you will find it.
Perfect. Well, Valerie, I thank you so much, Claire. Your time is precious. I know that. I don't want to keep you away from the test tubes, but you don't do that anyway, do you?
Luckily not.
Thank you ever so much for your time. It's a real pleasure. I've learned a lot, and I hope people listening will. And it's opened up people's minds to don't just think it's the tremor. There's lots of other things as well, and help as well, and support. So I thank you very much indeed, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well then, that was the lovely, lovely Claire Dale, Assistant, do I get this right? Assistant Director of Research, External Communications and Involvement. Please look at the website, Parkinson's UK. If you are a sufferer out there and you do feel isolated, please, you know, the help is there, the suggestions of what you can do to keep yourself going and still have a laugh and everything. And I thank Claire enormously for the work she does and for her whole team and Parkinson's generally. What a wonderful charity. Now then, next people coming up. Now we're going to go from well, I'll just tell you what next week's going to be. In my other life, I deal with child abuse and perpetrators of child abuse. And next week, when I have my next show, I think this is another one that's very necessary. People have a lot of mythology and wrong thoughts about paedophilia. I'm not supporting it at all, other than I have got a neuroscientist coming on who has studied the brain of a paedophile and explains what it is that's gone on in the brain, why it's happened, and how that manifests itself, and what we can do early on to stop it being this heinous crime that's absolutely seems to be getting worse and worse. So please tune into Parkinson's. As I say, I have a varied amount of people that come on. And so that's next week to look forward to. I don't know whether you look forward to it, but it will make you think, well, I didn't know that. And that's what I like about my show. I always find at the end, well, we didn't know that. So thank you, Claire, and God bless everyone. And I'll see you next time.